as a Christian, we have ground to stand on. Those are Christian ideas. We have ground to stand on to say that justice and rights exist. But as an unbeliever, what ground do you stand on to say that those things exist, and where do they come from? Where do rights come from? If you're an unbeliever, then they're just arbitrary, and you get to decide who has rights and who doesn't have rights at whatever point in history based on cultural standards or norms. Hey, welcome back to Campfire Apologetics. I'm Mark Hudson, and this is where I do my best to help the everyday Christian defend their faith in a hostile culture. And we also talk about theology and all kinds of different biblical subjects. And so, yeah, we like to cover a lot of different things on this channel. Although I do need to kind of hone in on a niche or a niche or however people pronounce that word. But I need to kind of hone in on something, because it seems like a lot of apologists have that kind of one thing that they really stick to. So I do like to talk about presuppositional apologetics and the deity of Christ. And I do like to speak about the Jehovah's Witness beliefs and things like that. So maybe I'll focus more heavily in those areas. But today's episode is actually another area that I really, really focus on. And that is on the issue of abortion. And lately, I came across a video by the Abolitionists Rising guys, who I love. I think they are doing just phenomenal work. And Russel, this guy, he's awesome. He does so much great work for the kingdom, and just for trying to defend the most innocent among us. And I came across this video, and I think that he did a phenomenal job. So I don't think that I'm going to really offer anything greater than what he has said. But as you watch videos and you hear conversations and things of that sort, you have your own thoughts. And so I had plenty of my own thoughts while watching this video. And so I wanted to do sort of a response. And like I said, not really so much a response to anything Russell said. I think that he was on point the whole time. And um, he said a lot of really great things. But more of a response to the absolutely abysmal and horrible arguments that are often made for the the advocacy of child sacrifice and murdering innocent children, also known as abortion. And so that's kind of what we're going to be talking about today. And it's really amazing to me when I watch these videos that Russell, he just never misses a beat. He's just on it. And I think it's probably because he puts himself in these situations and these conversations almost daily. So he's heard it all, and he hears all the same stuff all the time, and not a single good argument has really ever been made for abortion. And he does a really good job at just internally critiquing and tearing down their own thoughts. And you'll see it because oftentimes they just jump to the next argument because they're like, oh, well, yeah, I realized that one was really stupid. And he's pretty much completely demolished every thought I had on that. So now I have to move on to the next really terrible argument. And, you're essentially just playing this whack-a-mole apologetics at that point. But yeah, he does an awesome job. And so I'm gonna add this video to the screen. Now, I also want to warn you that I'm sure that there's probably some colorful language in this. So if you have young children around, or you don't want to hear certain things yourself, then this is kind of your fair warning before I play this. Now, I don't remember exactly what she may or may not have said. I'm just warning you that these conversations a lot of the time get kind of heated and people say all kinds of crazy stuff. So, with that said, let's see. Can I do this? Will that? Oh, look at that. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and start playing this video, and let's see some of the stuff. I think I stopped it right at a point that she she starts talking about something that is not that great of an argument, but sounds very emotional, and it definitely is a popular argument. So let's go.
For it.
What's the context
Well, let's say this.
for
What if it's
consideration?
a rape baby? All right. What about then? What if she's 12 years old?
Stand up for the rape baby. My goodness. What?
Okay, so you would force a 12-year-old to
Yeah, you punish the.
Yes. So that's super popular. What about in cases of rape? And like Russell said, stand up for that rape baby. He makes the point that you punish the rapist, not the innocent child that was conceived in rape. And so that's a great point that I think Russell makes, but also this is a so popular of an argument. This is probably one of the most popular arguments, and they'll bring this up, and they won't realize that abortions in the cases of rape are such an insanely small percentage of, of abortions. I think it's less than 1% of abortions are due to cases of rape. And so if you were to ask, would you advocate for abortion only in the cases of rape? And then, so are you saying that every other case, then it's wrong? And they will almost every single time say, no, I think that abortion should be allowed all the time. And so you can see that this rape argument is kind of a smokescreen. It's an emotional appeal to try to get you to bend your beliefs, to say, yeah, okay, in cases of rape we can do that. And then you have the slippery slope of, okay, yeah, in cases of rape, and then you go, okay, yeah, the mother can't afford the baby. Okay, yeah, the mother wasn't ready. Okay, and then essentially you're just on board with them 100%, and now you agree to abortion in all cases. And so this abortion in case of rape argument is poor because of that, but also because they don't really care about the rape victim. They just want women to be able to have abortions anytime for any reason. It has nothing to really do with the rape. And you can ask them that, like, okay, let's grant you, for the sake of argument, allowing abortions in the case of rape, which I would never advocate. I would never argue for that. But just for their argument, let's grant that. Are you against it in all other cases? And they'll say no. Okay, so why bring up rape? It has nothing to do with your argument. You're just trying to distract from the fact that you support it in all instances. And so now, another place that you can go with this, and Jeff Durbin does this all the time, and I think that this is a really great question to ask, is if somebody says that abortion should be okay in the case of rape, you can ask them, what is wrong with rape? Now, of course, you're not saying that you don't think that there's anything wrong with it. That's not what you're getting at. You're trying to draw out of them why rape is wrong in the first place. From their worldview, what makes rape wrong? And so you could probably both agree that rape is wrong because it is somebody forcing themselves upon another person against their will. And so when they agree to that um, reasoning, when they agree to that's why abortion or that's why rape is wrong, well, if they're consistent, then they would have to also apply that to abortion. and they have just made a case for or against abortion. Because if they're against people forcing themselves on another person against their will, well, that's exactly what happens in an abortion. That's exactly what happens when a doctor goes in and rips the baby limb from limb and kills that baby, or when the mother takes a pill that chemically kills that baby. That's exactly what happens there. So if you're against rape, then you should also be against abortion. Um, so let's move on here and let's see what else we can find in this video.
Okay, so
Rightly
you're
understood.
committing a sin right there with your shirt.
No, I'm not.
Yes, you are. It is
No.
a sin to wear two different
No,
fabrics
First
woven
Amendment.
together.
So this is something atheists love to do. Maybe not even just atheists, but just unbelievers in general. They love to go to the ceremonial and civil laws of the Old Testament, and they love to try to point out that you're wearing clothes made of a different fabric and things of the sort. And this just shows that they have done absolutely no research or study into the laws in the Old Testament and what they were for and what they meant and what the purpose of them was and what is still binding today under the new covenant. And it's it's really funny is actually this isn't even something that just unbelievers bring up. I've had believers bring this up too, because I have tattoos, and a lot of them will bring up Leviticus in chapter 19, and they'll talk about you shall not make any cuts to your body and this and that, right? And I've done an episode on that, so I'm not going to get into the specifics of what that means, but it's really funny when people bring this up, especially Christians, because they'll have their beard trimmed and their hair cut. And if you look in that same context, within a few verses of the tattoo text, it speaks about, excuse me, it speaks about not cutting your hair and not shaving your beard or trimming your beard and things like that. So if tattoos are a sin, then so is cutting your hair and trimming your beard. And I'm seeing this a lot with these Hebrew roots guys now talking about we must keep the Torah, and they really just clearly have a misunderstanding of what it meant that Jesus fulfilled the law. But a lot of those guys will bring up the law in the Torah and they'll point out those things, but they're extremely inconsistent, and they won't grant that, oh yeah, I probably should just grow my beard and grow my hair out, because if I'm consistent with the text and tattoos are a sin, then this thing also must be a sin as well. But they don't treat it that way. And so again, that's just kind of inconsistency. Now on this hand, these unbelievers here are just extremely ignorant of what these things mean, and they will tell Christians that they're picking and choosing, and it's not a matter of whether or not we're picking and choosing. It's a matter of understanding what we are picking and choosing and why we are picking and choosing. So we're not just picking and choosing what we find to be nice or good for us. We're choosing the things that are reiterated in the New Testament under the new covenant, and we understand what laws still apply today and what laws don't apply, like civil laws from the first century Israel obviously do not apply today. And you could see that in the words of the apostles and Jesus. There's things that they repeat, there are things that they do not repeat. Jesus says he fulfills the law. I mean, there are that could be its own episode of itself, and it probably will be at some point, because I've been dealing a lot with these Hebrew roots guys, and that's just sparked a whole different debate. But either way, you could see that they pick and choose as well, because you'll go to that same law that they point to, and they will agree that when it says to steal and to murder and things of that sort, that those things are wrong, and they agree with that. But then a few paragraphs later, you'll see where it speaks about a man laying with another man being an abomination and homosexuality not being part of the natural created order and not part of how God designed marriage and how it is a sin, and they will disagree with that. And it's, well, so okay, but what standard are you using to say that the murder and the stealing are bad and you agree with that, but now over here you disagree with what it just said about homosexuality? So it's not just the Christian who picks and chooses, it's it's the unbeliever as well, but who's being consistent in their beliefs and who actually understands what the Bible is saying. And so that's where this conversation kind of goes. And this woman here, you guys got to go and watch this whole video. And if I remember, I will try to link it in the description. It is these are some of the worst arguments. I mean, her her ability to reason correctly and to use logic is just almost non-existent. And I'm not saying that to be mean or rude against her in any way. I'm saying that you could show that her futile is, or not her, her thinking is futile, and it is because it is not aimed at Christ. She makes some really horrible arguments, and again, Russell does such a great job at just dismantling them. But let's move on. Let's see what else we can find.
Hey, that guy's
It's a
saying.
sin to wear two different fabrics woven together.
Nope.
That is in the Bible.
No, I follow the whole Bible, and ceremonial laws about like blends and stuff like that are not binding for people who are not in ancient Israel.
Yeah, well, there you go. Russell just said exactly what I just said. He said it in a much quicker way, and sometimes you need to be able to do that because these conversations move pretty quickly, and a lot of the time the people won't allow you to really elaborate in the way that you want to get your point across. But I digress. All right, let's move on. Okay, well, I just scrubbed through and tried to find where I thought she said when I was watching before, and maybe she did, and I just can't find it in the video. I should probably do a better job at looking at the whole video and maybe I can't talk, making some kind of time markers or something so I can get back to it. But I could have sworn that I heard her say um, that, or not say, but ask the question to Russell, how many children have you adopted? And they use that as this gotcha, gotcha. You haven't adopted any children, so you can't speak against abortion. Well, one really doesn't have anything to do with the other, but you can, whether or not you've adopted, and yeah, what I mean by that is whether or not you've adopted any children or not doesn't speak to whether or not abortion is wrong or right. It could be very possible that you haven't adopted any children and abortion is still wrong. But I've had people ask me that before, and I've asked them, how many children have you saved from the child sex trafficking ring? And if the answer is zero, then does that then make child sex trafficking okay? Does it make it right? Like, well, if you're going to be consistent, then you would have to apply that same line of argumentation to the abortion argument. Just because somebody hasn't adopted children doesn't mean that abortion is not heinous and wrong. And so if you're going to stick to that argument and you think that sex trafficking is wrong, which I do as well, it's absolutely horrible, then you need to go and be a vigilante and save some children from the sex trafficking rings. And and you could apply that in so many different ways as well. And then they get into these talks on slavery. So let me find that here.
that culture needed to change, hence abolitionists.
Yeah,
I
and
think
they argued for
the
it
laws
based on
allowing the
idea
murder
that,
of
if we
children
got rid of the
need to
slaves,
change.
all the money would get more expensive, stuff would get worse. Basically, a fucked up version of capitalism.
They
They were
they
putting
did.
profits over
They
people.
yep.
That's
Right.
basically what I'm saying. They were putting profits over people.
And that's wrong, right?
Yeah, of course.
So they put profits over people, and you're putting something else over people.
I'm putting people over people.
Well, slave owners were people, and they thought that we were trying to take away their rights and hurting their economies.
But you
And they
but
made the
this
same
isn't
arguments that
slavery.
you're
This isn't
making.
even anywhere close to it.
This is worse than slavery.
You think this is worse than slavery?
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely.
that is a voice of privilege, my friend.
Now, see, slaves were being murdered, right? And that was wrong.
Oh man, yeah. So this whole conversation is so off the rails, but it is, yeah. Russell is trying to paint the picture that abortion, the arguments used for abortion are the same arguments that were used for slavery. You don't like abortions, don't have one. Okay, you don't like slavery, don't own one. The slave owner was just doing what was best for them. They needed the slave to be able to tend their land and help them make money. And there's so many parallels, and they just don't see it. And it was abolitionists who came forward to end the slave trade, to end slavery, chattel slavery in the States. And so it's always abolitionists who tend to do these things. It's a small group of people, this minority group of people, that need to come together to change the culture. And that's what happened with slavery. It was a very small group of people, and eventually more people caught wind of it, and more people started to realize that, yes, this is incorrect. All people are made in the image of God. And for that very reason alone, slavery is wrong. And you cannot own people. You cannot steal people, as it says in the Old Testament, because people like to try to argue that the Old Testament supports slavery. And again, that's just them not understanding the context of first century Israel and what slavery actually meant in that context, because it's a different thing altogether. But I've had a few episodes on that as well, so I'm not going to get into those details, but it's just another example of them really not caring about the context and just trying to make these useless, empty arguments that don't hold up. Because if you really look into it, you'll see that man stealing is a capital crime, and that person should be put to death. So by biblical standards, a slave owner in the antebellum South should have been put to death. And it was the Christian abolitionists who came along and they preached that idea. This is wrong. And what these people here are saying, they're making the argument that abortion is legal. It's totally legal. So therefore it's fine, which I've talked about this before. Legality does not equate to morality. Just because something is legal does not make it good. It doesn't make it a good thing. And if you want to make that argument, slavery was also legal. It was the same thing. It was the same as abortion. It was legal. People owned slaves. They weren't breaking any laws, except for the supreme and unchanging law of God. And so that's the problem, is if culture has this thing that's legal and, they're like, well, this is good because it's legal. Well, that's what abolitionists do. They realize the faults and the horrible things that are happening in culture, and they try to make a change. They try to make a change to those laws. Things that are legal that shouldn't be legal, they try to make a change to those things and preach the gospel and change the hearts and minds of men so that they align their laws with God's laws. And so that's what's going on with abolition. And they, I think maybe a little bit before this portion of the video, they're talking about rights and justice. And as a Christian, we have ground to stand on. Those are Christian ideas. We have ground to stand on to say that justice and rights exist. But as an unbeliever, What ground do you stand on to say that those things exist, and where do they come from? Where do rights come from? If you're an unbeliever, then they're just arbitrary, and you get to decide who has rights and who doesn't have rights at whatever point in history based on cultural standards or norms. So in this instance, that's what they're doing, is they're deciding that these little humans in the womb don't have rights. They've drawn a circle around themselves. They've drawn a circle around people that are outside of the womb to say that they have rights. But the ones that are inside of the womb, the innocent, defenseless babies inside of the womb that are in probably the safest place that they could possibly be on the face of the earth, is their mother's womb. They're the ones that don't have rights. And if you just leave rights up to the human mind and human reasoning and our kind of fake autonomous ideas, then you're going to run into so many problems down the road. You're going to have people saying that we should have rights, but that political party shouldn't have rights because they disagree with us. It's a slippery slope, and it runs in that direction, that whoever has the most power is eventually at some point, or could eventually at some point, determine that the people in lesser power don't have rights. They're the minority. They don't have rights. Our political system is right and theirs is wrong, and we disagree with them. Therefore, we should be able to do with them what we want, whether that be killing them or enslaving them again, or whatever the case may be. But the point is that if your rights don't come from the objective and unchanging standards of God's word and God himself, he is the very source of rights. And if you don't look to him, then rights just become arbitrary, and you could do whatever you want down the road, and you could justify them in any way you want because you've detached yourself from the objective source of those rights. And so that's kind of where that conversation was going. I don't remember exactly what Russell says there. Again, I was more focusing on the crazy things that these two people are arguing and saying, and they make so many other really crazy, terrible arguments. And again, you should definitely go back and watch that whole video. I think it's like 29 minutes long, like half hour or something like that. So it's not too terrible. So if you have the time in your day to maybe just, you could play it in the background. You don't have to necessarily watch the video. You can just listen to the audio and you could still get the same points. But anyway, that's about all I'm able to scrub out of that video for right now. I plan on doing more response videos. There's never ending content out there as far as that goes. So anyway, I hope that you guys enjoyed this episode and that it was encouraging or edifying or educational in some sense. And maybe you can leave a comment. You could tell me what are some of the worst arguments you've heard for supporting abortion, and let me know. Maybe it's something I haven't heard before. I've heard quite a few of them though, so it's going to be hard to bring up a new one because they've all been said before. But sometimes they just come in different forms, but they're usually saying the same thing. But anyway, brothers and sisters, thank you again for watching and listening and supporting this channel. And I hope you liked this episode, but always be ready to give a reason for the hope that is in you, and to do that lovingly and with respect. I will see you next time.